We are pleased to also have Dr. Derrell Peel here with us tonight from Oklahoma State University. Dr. Peel is the Charles Breedlove Professor of Agribusiness in the Department of Agricultural Economics. He has served as Extension Livestock Marketing Specialist since he came to Oklahoma State University in 1989. His main program areas at Oklahoma State include livestock market outlook and marketing and risk management education for livestock producers. Dr. Peel also works in the area of international livestock and meat trade, with particular focus on Mexico and Canada and the North American livestock and meat industry. He lived in Mexico on sabbatical in 2001, and he has developed an extensive knowledge of the Mexican cattle and beef industry and the economics of cattle and beef trade between the US and Mexico. He also previously served as the superintendent of the Southeastern Colorado Ranch Research Station in Springfield, Colorado. Great to have you, Dr. Peel, and I will turn it over to you.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this evening. What I want to spend just a few minutes with you before we get to the Q&A is to give you a little bit of an update on what the U.S. cattle and beef market situation is. Obviously, it's a big thing, and there's lots of pieces, but I've got a handful of slides here that I'm going to share with you to kind of give you an update on what's going on in the U.S. industry. Obviously, our two industries are very closely related, and we're in a very unique situation in the U.S. market. So let me bring you up to date. About a week ago, USDA released the annual cattle inventory report. I say annual, technically it's semi-annual. We get one in January, we get one in July, but only the January one is really complete with all the state level data and so on. But what it shows, here we go. So, we have been in liquidation mode in terms of any measure you want to use. I've got beef cow inventory up here. This goes back a long ways, and there's a reason why this chart goes back so far. So if you drop back about a decade, in 2014, we were at a low in the U.S. industry, towards the right-hand side here. And we got there because drought forced us to liquidate and become smaller than we intended to be and smaller than we needed to be. And when we got some relief from the drought, we put together a very rapid cyclical expansion. Now, the beef industry in the U.S. has a long history of cattle cycles. But this one was very much in that line. We were ready for that. We peaked in 2019 with cattle numbers and started a relatively slow liquidation until more drought hit. And then 2021 and 22 and 23, we liquidated much more rapidly. So as of January 1 of 2024, the current U.S. beef cow herd, the basic source of supply for the industry, is lower than 2014. In fact, it's at the lowest level since 1961. You can see from that red line. So we're in some very not unprecedented territory, but territory we haven't been in for a long time with animal numbers. And think about that 2014 low, and then where we are now. And obviously, again, all categories of cattle inventory are down. This is the calculated feeder supply in the U.S. We're lower now than we were in 2014, or 2015 actually was the bottom then. In fact, you can calculate this number. I can calculate it with our data back to 1972, and the current feeder cattle supply in the U.S. is the smallest for that entire data period. So, again, by any measure you want to use, we're in very low levels of inventory, and so you look at the market response to that. Again, this was the the drought of 2011, 12, and 13 over here provoked this price response. Largely the market's reaction to incentivize herd rebuilding. So the focus was on the calf level. We saw calf prices unprecedented at that time. The bigger feeder cattle here's the 800-pound feeder cattle in the green line, and then fed cattle here, all set new record levels at that time. Now we find ourselves again with 2 or 3 years of drought behind us, and we're starting to see these market responses. And once again, we've set new records. Fed cattle set a new record in April or so of 2023. The feeder cattle in August of 23, and the calves are just now doing it. And when you look at this chart, you say, yeah, it looks a lot like the first half of this one over here. The difference that's really important is that these peak prices in 2014 and 15 occurred a year to a year and a half into herd rebuilding. So after we started the process of herd rebuilding, most notably retaining heifers to rebuild the herd, that's what put the peak in prices. We have not done any heifer retention, and we have not started the process of herd rebuilding yet in the US. So, this is probably for this audience, maybe the most important or most interesting slide is what's going on in our feedlot situation. The blue line is monthly feedlot inventories in the U.S. They're very seasonal, so it's a very a lot of movement in this line. But if you take a 12-month moving average, which is the green line, that really shows you the trend. So remember that cattle numbers peaked in 2019. In fact, the calf crop in the U.S. actually peaked in 2018. We've been getting smaller for the last 5 years, and yet feedlot inventories did not peak until late in 2022, and they've only come down quite modestly since then. Compare that to where we were in 2014, which is this low I've plotted over here, because I think this is a reasonable target of where U.S. feedlot inventories are headed in the next few months. Now, it's taken longer to come down than I expected for a variety of reasons, but the longer we go, we're sort of working on defying gravity as, for a longer period of time, and the longer we do it, the emptier is the situation behind it. The biggest reason we've been slow to bring down feedlot inventories is because we have continued to liquidate females in the U.S. herd, specifically heifers on feed. Heifers on feed are still running about 40% of feedlot inventories. That's not this graph, that's a different graph, but this is a key statistic, I think, for the U.S. industry. In the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, over 51% of all of the cattle that we harvested in the U.S. industry were female, either cows or heifers. And that has not happened since 1986 in the U.S. So even the 2014 drought and the subsequent lows did not reach this kind of peak in terms of female slaughter. All of that to say that we're in a very different situation. We are not growing yet. We're not even attempting to grow yet. And when we start that process, it's going to be a very slow process. We simply do not have the ability to grow very fast. So those prices we saw in that earlier chart are not near the peak of that. They're way over on the left shoulder of that previous price thing. These prices here are probably about here, relatively speaking. And the peak that we get this time is going to be not only a ways away yet, but it's going to last longer because it's going to take longer. So beef production is falling in the U.S. And we can talk about retail prices and so on if you want in the U.S. I was very interested in the previous comments about this Canadian situation. We peaked all-time beef production in 2022. Beef production is falling. We expect it to fall another 5% or so in 2024, probably close to another 5% in 2025 at a minimum. And then we see beyond there how things play out between now and then. We're going to be in an extended period of reduced production. That's going to continue to support prices. And right now, the market's simply trying to provide high enough prices, particularly for calves, to incentivize this herd rebuilding process that will actually then squeeze small supplies even more. And the peak in prices is a ways away and substantially higher than where we are. So last slide here, the solid part of these lines for calves, these are annual averages, so they take out a lot of the short run noise in the marketplace. Annual average prices for 2023 ended here for calves, feeder cattle, and fed cattle. And you can see from this chart that we're forecasting for the next 2 years higher annual average prices, at least through that period. And that's not to say that I think it's over by then. The peak prices may occur in something like 2025, but I think we're talking about an extended period of elevated prices, perhaps more of a plateau than a sharp peak like we had last time. I think this is going to be a much longer lived process we're going to be in tight supplies. That has implications for trade, both beef and animals in North America, and lots of implications for certainly U.S. producers and the feedlot industry here in the U.S. going forward. So I'm going to stop my share there, and I'll be looking forward to the opportunity to take your questions and comments a bit later.
Awesome. So I'll just give a few seconds if anyone else wants to throw a final comment.